Jonathan Taylor's hurt again. Let's talk about it on Fantasy Football Today in 5. Welcome to FFT in 5. I'm Chris Towers. I'm here with Heath Cummings, and unfortunately, we're talking about another Jonathan Taylor absence. This time, it looks like it's going to be, the hope is 2 to 3 weeks. This is one of those situations, we mention it a lot when we're talking post-game on Sunday or even on Monday. Like, these are the injuries we know about. And then Monday and Tuesday will come around and we'll learn about more injuries. And unfortunately, Jonathan Taylor suffered a thumb injury at some point during Week 12. Played through it, played great, was still a big part of the Colts game plan late into the game. I think he picked up the game-clinching first down with about a minute left in the game. And then we learn on Tuesday afternoon that he has a thumb injury. It will require surgery. He's going to have surgery on Wednesday. And the nice thing about this situation, I guess, is this isn't one of those, remember when Kyren Williams got hurt and we were just like, we have no idea what the Rams backfield is going to look like. We know what the Colts backfield is going to look like, Heath. And what are your expectations for Zack Moss over the next couple of weeks?
I think he'll be one of the best running backs in fantasy football. He was a top 10 running back without Taylor earlier in the season. He's been one of the most efficient runners in the NFL this year. He's been good as a pass catcher. Gardner Minshew throws to his running backs 3 to 5 times per game, it seems. And so I think you're looking at someone who you rank and start as a top 10 number 1 running back until Jonathan Taylor is back. And listen, he was available in about 30% of leagues, 30% of leagues. If he's out there on fab on the waiver wire in your league, you should probably spend all of your fab on him if you have any left.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking about Pat Freiermuth as the clear top waiver wire target this week. Clearly, it's Zack Moss if he's available in your league. You said about 30% of CBS fantasy leagues. I saw it on Sleeper, he's about 52% rostered. I think on ESPN, he was in the 55% range as well. So in other formats, if you're playing on them, there's a big opportunity here for Zack Moss to, at the very least, get you into the playoffs. It becomes a little trickier if this ends up being a 2-week injury for Jonathan Taylor. Because can you really expect Jonathan Taylor to come back in week 15, let's say, and just go back to playing 70% of the snaps like he had been over the past month or so?
I think it would look more like what we saw. And I asked this on the Sunday night show. We had no report, of course, about a Sunday night injury. But there was a pretty big change in their usage last week. Taylor played really well. He had 91 rushing yards and had the big carry at the end of the game. But it was Zack Moss's highest snap share since week 7. It was his first 3 targets since week 8. Jonathan Taylor did not see a target in the passing game. If he does make it back in 2 weeks, my presumption would be that Taylor would be the early downs back and that Moss would be the pass catching back.
Yeah, we saw Moss play 1 game with Gardner Minshew. Remember, he was playing more early on in the season when Anthony Richardson was the QB. The 1 game he did play with Gardner Minshew, 122 yards on 30 carries against the Ravens, one of the best defenses in football. Only 3 targets for 2 catches, 23 yards, and a touchdown in that game. And Minshew's down to his target rate to running backs is right around 15%, so that's not super high, but I mean, we expect Moss to play 85, 90% of the snaps if he can hold up to it, right?
I would say at least 80% of the snaps, yes.
Yeah, so it's a situation where however long Taylor's out, Zack Moss is an absolute must-start fantasy running back. Let's move on to a big question for week 13. We usually do, big questions for every position. We don't have time for that with the Taylor injury, but I do just want to get your thoughts on where are you at with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua? It's been 5 subpar games for Cooper Kupp in a row. Now, Puka Nacua, he's still had at least 7 targets in every game this season, including during this, recent stretch where he hasn't been so great. But we saw a renewed focus on Kyren Williams last week. We saw the Rams run a lot more against the Cardinals. It might have just been because it was the Cardinals, but big role for Royce Freeman in that game. Where are you at on these two?
I'm still starting Puka Nacua because I think he's still healthy, and I still am too influenced by what he did earlier in the season. Listen, if it's actually going to be 7 targets a game, then he's probably a number 3 wide receiver because 7 targets doesn't make you a must-start wide receiver. But for now, I'm still starting him as a high-end number 2 wide receiver, Nacua. Cooper Kupp is a borderline number 2, maybe a number 3. It's really been 2 good games for him all season long. His first 2 games back, he hasn't done anything. He hasn't even scored double-digit fantasy points since then, and he's not healthy at all. He can't run full speed. He's playing through an ankle injury that he said the only reason he's playing through it is because they told him he couldn't hurt it more. I think he's more of a decoy than anything else.
Yeah, I will say there are a lot of excuses for why Cooper Kupp hasn't performed well since those first 2 games, right? We had Matthew Stafford leaving one game and then missing another game. And then I think we got one healthy game from Kupp before he hurt his ankle. Clearly wasn't 100% last week, but yeah, it's been really rough. If we didn't have 6 teams on bye, including, this is one where if you look at the running backs on bye in week 13, it's not so bad. You can live without some of the guys we're missing. Like Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley, they're big names, but they're not necessarily top 12 running backs anymore. The wide receivers that we're missing this week, there's a lot of big names out there that we're going to miss. So if it was a normal week where we weren't missing all those guys, yeah, you might be sitting Cooper Kupp. It might be harder to get away from him this week. So yeah, I agree with you. Wide receiver 2 for Puka Nacua, wide receiver 2/3 for Cooper Kupp. And that's going to do it for FFT and 5. We'll talk to you tomorrow.